Welcome to Africa Media Australia. Clyde, Sharady here. I have with me Georgia and Fadumo talking about this research as we started talking about last time, looking at physical activities in older Somali women. How are you, Georgia?
Good, thank you, Clyde. Thanks for having us.
Very nice to have you here. Fadumo, how are you?
Nice to see you again.
All right. Now, today we're talking about the impact of stress on this group of, this group of women on their physical activity. Tell us a bit more about how that has worked in the research that you undertook.
Well, as part of looking at the physical activity, we came about that the ladies were very stressed and overwhelmed by having to be forced here from Somalia. And so they feel that there's part of themselves are still left in the country they love, and they really appreciate Australian culture, but they really feel torn between both countries. So they've left a part of themselves back in Somalia and trying to live here as best they can. In doing so, though, this creates a lot of angst, stress about relatives that are left back home and the conditions in which they live and have to operate back there. Now, this is very tiring, and often the calls that are coming from Somalia come in the middle of the night. And so it's very stressful. They wake up, they can't sleep, and they're always worrying about the people that are back home. And I think that real stress, that constant tiredness, that stress, really has affected the amount of physical activity they do because they're very tired. And that affects their overall health and well-being. And they do say that stress has caused them to overeat and put on weight. And consequently, that affects their health here in Australia.
Absolutely. Furthermore, I guess you would also kind of agree that many of the older Somali women, and in fact, most migrants still think a lot about where they've come from. There's still that nostalgia and everything that is related to it. Tell us a bit more about how you saw that in the study.
I understand myself because I have a family back there too, and my mother is still affected that. She still calls it and send the money. But it was how we can show Georgia about this exactly within how we're feeling, and it come across good when we told her. And also we have a Somali channels they're watching every time instead of Somali. They don't understand English, so they tended to watch Somali channels
news
all the time, news. So that brings that too for the bad memory, and it's still happening too.
Yeah, I mean, even only just perhaps very recently, we were visiting a lady.
Yes.
A phone call came through,
Yep.
and her daughter-in-law had just passed away, giving birth to her child at 8 months. And so I suppose as a researcher and as a person who lives in a white culture and as a white person, those sort of things generally don't tend to happen to me. So I don't tend to experience that sort of stress. And I can't imagine the overwhelmingness of that situation and how that must affect that particular person. And Fadumo kept saying, well, that happens to us all the time. We are constantly getting these calls. And so as a researcher, I began to appreciate that sort of stress that those people live under and how that must affect their health and well-being. Because if that was to happen perhaps to my family here in Australia, my family would be devastated and would cause a great deal of stress. But these sort of phone calls are coming all the time.
Yeah, because I think even for like the general member of the public, exercising, for someone to take that decision to go and do exercise, you got to have a frame of mind that will allow you to go and do exercise. If there's a lot of stress, and then it becomes very difficult to make that decision that I have to go exercise. So it becomes even more difficult for older women who have family to take care of. You know, they've got a house to run and all that sort of thing. And then on top of that, there's the financial burden.
It is.
Tell us about how people experience that financial. The stress coming from the fact that they are expected to help people from back home.
Well, bear in mind they all they get is a doll in here. They don't work, and that doll being divided to send it back home, it's just stressful. You can tell. It's just it's not right. But they do it because they know what's happening to them, and they've been experienced before, so they have to do it. There's no other choice. So. Yeah, it must be stressing.
Like we always say, as Africans here, when we talk with our friends, Australians, you guys have no back home. We have back home. They expect you to send money, and that's a lot of stress.
Yeah, and I suppose during the research, I had my house fall down in a storm, and I was sort of dislocated for quite a few months. I had to live at a few people's houses and move and try and get my phone hooked up. And I felt stressful because all those things were happening to me, and I wasn't exercising. I didn't have time. I was stressed. I had to move house. I had to do this. And so I sort of had a small taste of perhaps how those community members feel. And I was living in my own country. Yeah. I could speak the language. I had finances. And I kept thinking to myself, if you didn't have this, if you couldn't do this, this would be even more stressful. And even for me, I didn't have time to go for a walk or go for a run or have a barbecue because I was too busy. And so it just gave me a small taste, perhaps, of how these women perhaps feel in this country.
Also, their teenagers are stressing out parents because they want their culture to be remain still within the teenagers and their children.
Yeah.
And it's like the children is torn between those two, and they eventually say, this is Australia where I live and I will go this, but the parent is stressing out that too.
Because the parents want their teenagers to still have you know, the culture from Somali, from where they come from.
And even some of them say they speak to them in Somali, but they'll only answer in English.
Yes.
And
I have that. I've seen that.
That's quite stressful too, because they want them to speak back to them in Somali.
Yeah.
And so even small things, but those small things add up.
They do.
And create, you know, a great deal of sort of inner turmoil, if you think.
And it is a power struggle because the mother or the parent wants to speak the language that they master, and they want the children to understand that, and they expect most of the time the children to obey them, but the children, to avoid that sort of power over them, they use English because they know possibly that the parent has little English. So it's a power struggle. So that also brings into issues, I guess, of overeating. Do they? What's they eating? Like, what did you find out?
Well, I suppose the food also is slightly different here. They had a lot of camel meat and goat's milk, which is low in fat but high in protein. And then they've come here and they've had to eat lamb and cow's milk. And so those sort of foods have created not only a different sort of taste, but also, you know, they feel like they have to eat more of it or to sort of get satisfied. It's a difficult concept, but it's different food, and they feel that food, because it's not organic as well, has created or put on a lot of fat.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of Somali food here in Melbourne? In your community, do you get a lot of authentic Somali food?
No, we don't. No, we don't.
No.
We even have a few restaurants in Somali. Yeah, we eat. The ladies who are watching their weights, they eat beans and grain things for natural things at night. They try it, but still they forced to have a pasta and rice, and we just happen to be kept it in the fridge for longer. And it's all of that cans and that changing process.
Going to get the food every day, which is
Not
probably
walking.
what they want, which includes walking. So that incidental exercise is gone.
Which is a lot. In Africa, it happens a lot.
It's a lot. So they would go to the market 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Here, you only go to the supermarket once a week.
Yeah.
And you might be driven there. So that incidental exercise, that stress, all causes sort of overeating and has given them health problems like high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And they struggle with that too, because they don't understand those illnesses when they get them, because they're not illnesses that happen in their own country.
And is there any impact of their religion into how they eat and how they exercise?
Yeah, so we've had this conversation because I read the Quran in English, and the Quran says you must have a third in your stomach. You must have a third of food, a third of water, and a third of air.
Oh.
And
Interesting, I've never heard that.
Yeah, so that causes you to only eat as much as you need.
Yep.
And so in order to transfer health information, we started sort of to use the Quran, the religion, in order to say, right, well, this is really only how much you should eat, using the religious terms. And that does help, but I still think they still say we're so stressed, we keep eating, and we've got the food access here. So we just keep eating. It's a way of a stress relief. So yes, the religion does say that. Is that right, Fadumo? They do. The Quran does say that.
Yes, and it's there exactly the way you said.
In terms of physical activity, you're told to be able to ride a horse, shoot an arrow, and
What was the third one?
something that was like throw a rock
Yeah,
or something
it's
like
from
that.
the
So we
religion
really
too.
couldn't draw on the Quran for the physical activity.
When they're talking of their own story or the story that you know of their journey before coming to Australia, and does that also have any impact on their stress? Or
I think Fadumo used to say that to me, even to talk about the stories over and over again, because I was doing the research, so I had to listen to these stories, is very, very confronting, because it brings the stories back, and some of them are quite horrific stories. And I would be in a situation where I would have Fadumo as the interpreter, but Fadumo crying, and also the person we were interviewing crying.
Oh.
And so, as a researcher, I had to be very protective of also my translator interpreter Fadumo, because for her, because she's a Somali community member, she can relate to these stories too. And so that was difficult as a researcher, because in order to understand, though, I had to hear. But it also caused quite a bit of grief for those people involved, and I think Fadumo also felt that, being the translator.
Yeah, wherever we want to bring out those, it will bring the memories too, so it was hard to listen to those stories. Often the ladies would say, but I want you to hear it, because if you don't hear it, you don't understand where we're coming from, you don't understand why we are so stressed.
Okay. What sort of physical activity a typical Somali woman would want to do if, let's say, they are in the mood to do physical activity? What exactly? Well, would they go in the gym? Would they walk? Would they do what do you call it?
No.
Lifting weight? Or what exactly would they do? Do you have any idea?
Swimming is much better at night
Ah,
for
yeah?
the ladies when they are all together for swimming, aerobic swimming in the water. That's the more popular. But no bike, no treadmill, not this kind of dress.
The swimming is a great thing, but again, living in a white culture, you're very limited. You have to have a women only, and the gym has to be women only, and so in the local community, that's only often done once a fortnight for 2 hours. So
wow, that's not enough.
It's not enough.
Physical activity, even if you'd like to do it, is difficult to do for a Somali woman.
Well, I guess to sum it up, from what you're saying, the impact of stress, which is related to so many things that affect the lives of this group of women, and all these other anxiety or tension, cultural tension, including what comes with in their interaction with their children. So there's just a significant amount of stress that affects these women.
And it's sort of all-encompassing. Like, there's not one particular one, but there's sort of layers of stress, if you like. And so as a researcher, you have to really stay in the field to understand all those layers, so that, you know, I think if you were there for 2 or 3 weeks, you wouldn't understand those things, you wouldn't hear all those. But being in the field for 4 or 5 years, you hear lots of stories and lots of layers and see lots of things. And I think that makes a difference to what you find out. Physical activity is not as easy as you think it is to do, or be part of your life anyway.
Okay, well, quite interesting, and I would like to be able to talk more about this, but we certainly will do in our next piece. For now, thank you very much, Fadumo. Thank you very much, Georgia, to talk about these quite important facets of community life, understanding the lives of Somali women, which I guess can be extended to many women in the broader African Australian community. We will continue this conversation in our next piece. Keep watching AMA, like us on Facebook, and make some donation on our website as well. Thank you very much.